Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and this is pretty cool. You people, I think that's really cool. So second time I presented a million cups. I did Salt Lake, but I did it virtually. So I mean, you guys aren't on Zoom, so this is really cool. So all right, so let's see. Which directions let's go? I don't know. This is backwards. Okay. Okay. All right. Veranalysis consulting. Some people are like, okay, what in the world is Veranalysis consulting? Well, Veranalysis is a what we do is we work with the healthcare community. It's nothing that's super sexy because most people don't think audits are really cool, okay? But we reduce the stress and costs associated with provider audits. We're also a resource in the event that a provider is audited. To give an idea, real quickly, one time, well, back up a little bit. For 10 years, I worked for Medicare and Medicaid contractors and investigated fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid. And usually when we went to a provider's office, they were not very happy to see us, if you can imagine that. But I saw many providers that were frankly punished unfairly because they flagged basically in some data analysis, right? All right, so I went to this chiropractor in Utah, in Salt Lake Valley, where they were flagging on use of a pain management device. Normally a chiropractor just does chiropractic services. These guys were doing more than that. So I went there and interviewed the provider, the chiropractor, but the person who was doing the pain management device actually was a nurse practitioner. And they showed me the device they use, which is a little electrode thing that attaches to your ear, okay? And it's like, okay. And they had their biller there from Dallas, Texas, who obviously was telling them how to bill. The problem with this is they were billing for a device that really was maybe worth a few $100s on reimbursement, and what they were actually getting in return was several thousand per, because what they were billing for actually was for a pain management device that's actually surgically put in on your back. That's a problem. But I walked away from that going, okay, this chiropractor has no clue. This nurse practitioner should have a clue, but they're getting bad advice from a biller. The end result, suspension of their Medicare payments and a law enforcement referral. And I walked away from that going, okay, I could have helped this guy if I was in a different position. So I guess what qualifies me, Veranalysis, 10 years of experience working for U.S. government contractors and different investigations. What people don't realize is a lot of investigations, they used to be word of mouth or someone calls, a hotline. Now a lot of things are database, predictive modeling, a lot of real-time data that looks at how you're billing compared to your peers and compares that to previous schemes and identifies you as a target. So, so with that background, I feel qualified to do this. I have a master's degree in healthcare business, and I also have a lean yellow belt certification. And so one of the problems is the audits are a burden. And so you have to, if you're a provider's office, you have to pay, well, you have to gather your medical records, because a lot of times these auditors can ask for claims that are 4 or 5 years old. And so some of that may be electronic health record system, but a lot of times not all of it is. So you have to pay overtime and take time away from your patients, for your staff to gather stuff. It costs $20,000 to $30,000 to hire an attorney to appeal what we call overpayment decision. That's where Medicare or another insurance says, hey, you should not have gotten paid for this claim. And let's see, there is a report I cited here that the Office of Inspector General, which is kind of the law enforcement end of the Department of Health and Human Services, did a sample of 87 home health providers over 3 fiscal years, and they identified an improper payment amount of 78%. I'm here to tell you most of that's not fraud. And also with chiropractors, which a lot of insurances treat chiropractors a little funny. I think chiropractors do some good things. Basically, you're talking a large amount, $304 million out of $450 million paid being considered improper for chiropractors. I call this problem part deux. So you have a little bit of difference. There's, like if you have private insurance, they may not be deeply as involved in the auditing. They have overutilization audits, basically looking to see, are you using codes too much? But they will send people on site and do prepayment reviews. The federal government's a little bit more, what's the word, aggressive, if you will, because taxpayer money. I mean, private payer, if they have losses, they could sock it to you on your insurance premiums. But there's a program that was created in 2009 called the Medicare Recovery Audit Program. It's called the RAC. That's like a 4-letter word to that and UPICs, the healthcare providers, that you might as well be dropping F-bombs to them. It identifies waste, errors, and improper payments, and in just a short time, 5 years, I identified $8 billion of improper payments. And these are based on, and most of that's incorrect coding, services deemed wrong, service, not medically necessary, documentation's insufficient, or other. And so when I see that, and I go, okay, most providers, let me just state it, most providers are not out to defraud you. There are a few, you find them in the news. I'm not going to click on the hyperlink due to time, but there's a story I've got here that talks about in a Utah provider who was defrauding the system. But for healthcare fraud cases, $2.6 billion of your taxpayer dollars were recovered in 2019. So it does exist, it is out there. You'll be happy to know that Utah is not the most fraudulent place in like America. I used to work in the Southeast, in Florida. It's pretty high up there. I worked for a company who had Los Angeles area. A lot of fraud there. So most providers have a negative experience with fraud audits. As I mentioned, it's a burden. And so I put on the slide, there are about 6,000 practicing physicians in the state of Utah. And so my initial focus was on 2%, it's like, hey, if I can reach 2% of them, I'm like super stoked. My focus was mostly on home health agencies, hospice agencies, chiropractors, even dentists on the Medicaid side. Because those providers are typically the subject of fraud audits. I mean, that's just like hospice. I don't know if you've had loved ones on hospice, but generally, if you're on hospice, you have 6 months or less to live. If you see a patient or a company's got a lot of patients on hospice and they've been on hospice for over a year, there's questions that come up. But if someone dies at 7 months, that's not too big of a deal, but those providers are targeted a lot. So I put it on a list here from the Certified Fraud Examiners, a list of stuff that are kind of the 10 most common fraud schemes. Kickbacks is on the list. Services not rendered. Like providers said, hey, I saw patients 24 hours a day. You probably didn't. Or if you were on vacation in Europe, which maybe you can't do right now, but in the past, and you said you saw patients that day, you probably didn't. So I put a SWOT analysis up here. For me, there's a little competition. I've looked on Google, done all these things, and say, okay, there's not a lot of people doing what I'm doing. There's attorneys' offices, and there's billing providers that, hey, I can maximize your reimbursement. My weakness is, one, there's a lack of audits in Utah. So there's providers who are like, hey, I've never dealt with this before. I don't have certifications because I never really had the need for them. I used to be a member of Certified Fraud Examiners, but I didn't test for it. Marketing, I am not a marketing guru. So studied marketing one class in college, that's it. There's more fraud in other states, so there's potential to do some things virtually. There's multiple insurance carriers. Some put a focus on this stuff more than others. One thing I've noticed a problem with, and true story here, I decided it was a great idea to launch in March of this year. And a week later, things shut down. You've probably heard that before, right? Okay. And there's attorneys' offices who offer similar services. They cost more than I do. And you'd be shocked to know that there's a changing regulatory landscape that goes on. So marketing strategy has been try to hook up with professional networking groups. Video series, I've done some videos. I use an app called Big View. I highly recommend it. Social media has not been effective for me because if you looked up providers on social media, they are usually not very social. Okay. Cold calling, it stinks, but have to do that. But one of the targets was conventions. We haven't had a lot of those. Chambers of commerce, attorneys. I've done a podcast series and a few called Healthcare Audit Crisis Solutions. I have some music on there, it's pretty dope. But I also have a side DJ business, side note. Yeah. So I can actually do an audit. You do an audit and you pass it, I'll throw a party for you. Pretty cool, right? So one thing I'm looking at doing on a pivot side is offering education, putting CPE credits together. So I'm really early in that. So services offered, typical consultant fee, $400 an hour for consulting if you're actually in the middle of a fraud audit. Can do educational presentations, and I kind of lay out on a pre-audit review. The idea is to do the audit, give you feedback. Basically, think of it as risk mitigation, because what you're paying me is going to be a small what it'll cost you later on. So just kind of identifying some flags and putting some mitigation plans in place. So the question is, how can a community help referrals of colleagues in the medical field? If you've ever had a colleague in the medical field and they have complained about dealing with insurance, I'm their guy, okay? Because insurance is cool, okay? Maybe not. But one thing I've done is I partnered with the technology company is trying to develop a contact tracing app that actually uses some blockchain data instead of Bluetooth. And I'm open to marketing ideas. A little cash strap is it's a bootstrap thing, and so there it is. And that's the logo, but kind of like a copy of the business card right there. Audits to protect, keep your money. Who doesn't want to keep money, right? Okay, so that is the wonderful world of Veranalysis Consulting. I am now open to any questions you may have. Thank you. I feel like I should be doing stand-up up here.
Jeremy, great job presenting. We have someone online who said, "Hi, Jeremy. I suggest you cut way down on the wording used for the slides you are sharing in your presentation. Too many words cause your audience to start reading and you lose their focus. Have a picture that speaks to what you are sharing or a headline phrase."
Should I respond to that? Okay. The answer to that is I don't disagree with you. Believe it or not, it is cut down a lot more. And I've heard that feedback before is it gets too verbose. And so I did struggle to find like a slide that actually, like a picture that totally shows, maybe I need to find someone who's got a picture of an audit in a kind of a dunce hat or something. I don't know. But thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that.
Just really quick, I like when you're talking about some of the pivots you're looking at or services offered, people currently going through audits that need some help. Mm-hmm. Is that when somebody's undergoing an audit like that, is that public record so you could find out, that'd be a good target list for you? I don't know if that's public record or not. Yeah, good question.
The answer to that is typically no. If they were part of an audit in the past and they went to, like, say, a criminal or civil suit level, then it is public record. But the government's got this crazy system they spend a lot of money on. It stinks. But it that has a repository of all that for years and years and years. But it's not public. So, yeah.
And that might also be good in your marketing to say, hey, when you go through an audit, here's your cost. If you use me before that, here's your cost, to kind of give them a comparative analysis.
Yeah.
And go through that exercise with people when you do get those visits with people who are looking for your services. Might be helpful for them to see that.
I agree. Thank you.
So I appreciate what you're doing. It certainly can save medical professionals a lot of money and heartache. I'm just curious, have you had any customers yet that you could get a testimonial from and add to your deck, a smiling face of a satisfied customer?
I have had a few that I probably need to bring that out a bit more, but yeah. My first customer was a chiropractor, and they weren't doing anything bad, but there was a few things we could identify they could improve on. And so, but yeah, I could definitely go back to them. And also, I kind of did some advising for a dentist and a a surgical center. So, but yes, Ken. I mean, the deal is, one of my failures, I think, so far has been focusing on some of the smaller businesses, because a lot of them are cash strapped. Usually it's the bigger practices that have a bit more money. Most people don't realize most healthcare provider offices that you see are small businesses, though a lot are being bought up in the current economy because the big boys are coming in and opt them and others are buying them up. So I don't want to see another provider go out of business that doesn't need to, because access to care, something I'm very passionate about is access to care, people having the ability to get the care they need, having options and things like that. I think that's huge, and I do my part to try to keep people in business. Yeah, sorry.
So the service that you offer is kind of preventative in nature, and I guess I think I used to do some consulting for medical offices and stuff. Typically, the owners don't really know that they need what you're selling to some degree. I guess the question is, who is it that do know that? I'd imagine it's whoever's doing their books, whoever's doing their accounting and some of their management. Have you reached out to those networks and tried to go through them to basically say, hey, based on your clientele, who do you know that would need this sort of thing? And then offer them a finder's fee or some degree to that. Have you done any sort of networking like that to find clients?
Not enough. That's a great suggestion, and one that I definitely need to spend more time on. I mean, if you've been through an audit, you know what it's like, but as you said, you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of them don't know, and so I need to do a better job of talking to some of those folks. I mean, it's been suggested to me to partner with billers, but finder's fee, a little bit of a, you help me out, give the referral, whatever, we'll pay you a little some finder's fee or something like that. So, but yeah, it's an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Where do you hope to see yourself in like 10 years with Veranalysis? Like, what would be your ultimate goal?
Ultimate goal in 10 years. It's a great question. Hopefully we have an army of Teslas that we can drive around in. It'd be really cool. I would like to see it expanded in multiple states. I'd like to see really being a guide out there. One thing I'd really love to expand into is not just helping providers, but helping people, beneficiaries of different insurances, because a lot of times you could be a college-educated individual, you get a medical bill, and you're like, what the heck is this? And or case in point, you can go to a hospital, go to an emergency room, and the hospital's in your network, but the emergency room physician's not, and you had no say over that. So I'd like to be involved, seeing Veranalysis get into helping people, translating some of the language that's out there, but also being a part of the healthcare discussion, the future of healthcare. What can we do? Partnering with some technology companies and things like that. So that's where I see, if I have my dream of dreams, that's where I see it going.
So it seems like you have a specific knowledge, very specific knowledge base. Has it been hard putting together a team that has that shares that knowledge base?
That's a good question. There are what I call lots of fraud operatives in the country. There are a lot. Actually, it's a very niched area, and so having worked in industry for 10 years, there are a number of people I know. So if I had to expand, there are some people in my LinkedIn profile today that I would go to say, hey, this is a situation. Are you in? But they're kind of spread out across the country. So with that comes a lot of remote. So it's like building that up here in Utah, though there are people who've worked in healthcare technology. There are people who've worked investigations and things like that. So, but they can be found. So.
All right, my question for you and our last question is, what can the 1MC, 1 Million Cup community do for you?
So the 1 Million Cup, what can they do for me? Well, I'm really looking forward to having some of the hot chocolate. That'll be really cool. But if you know of connections to healthcare providers, what I mean by providers is it could be it's kind of mentioned earlier on the question for a gentleman up front. If you know of healthcare provider friends, and I'm talking billing people, I'm talking office administrators and things like that who deal with all the craziness that comes in, I would love to have a conversation with them. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my messaging needs to be, I know it needs to be shorter. To the question earlier, the person who, or suggestion about the verbose language and all that. I know it needs to be shorter and straight to the point. I don't use fear tactics, but conversations, because I'm looking to refine the message. I want to help, but I also know I'm coming from a bias of the government contractor side, trying to reverse that, and there's some nuances that I could stand to learn from. So providers, provider administrators, billing people, if you have those contacts or someone who's worked in that industry before, I'd love to have a conversation with them.